What's up YouTube, and welcome to another digital art tutorial where today I'm going to show you how you can create this curly tree design. Now my app of choice today will be Infinite Painter, but you can easily follow along with any app of your choice, whether it's High Paint, Ibis Paint or anything like that. If you are a Infinite Painter user, you can download the palette file using the link in the description down below, and there's also a helpful video on how to get it into Infinite Painter as well. And if you are using any other type of app, you can go ahead and download the palette image. So you've got at least that to grab the colors from to use for today's design. As always, a massive thank you to all of my members here on the channel who help make these videos possible and support me and the work that I do here. You can get early access to these videos as well as a loyalty badge that grows over time by becoming a member using the link in the description down below. Enjoy today's tutorial and let's get started. So today's canvas size is of course 2000 by 2000, and we'll go through to our canvas. And of course you're going to want to grab the palette. As I mentioned in the intro, there's multiple ways you can do this, but once you've downloaded the palette and imported it into Infinite Painter, again there's a helpful video on how to do that. You'll have it up here in your palettes. You've got the Curly Tree 40 palette. Now if you are using a different app potentially, you may want to download the image of the palette so you've got the actual file. And then you can go ahead and go to like your three dots and go to something like import and import it as a reference, or just use the reference tool potentially like in High Paint, and just make sure that your settings have a option somewhere in there for long press and have it set to eyedropper, and that way you can hold down on the reference photo and grab the colors from there. So that just hopefully allows everybody to participate. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do here is go ahead and go to our options. We're going to go to perspective and grid. And then make sure you've got the magnet turned on so it's grey like so, and you can just drag this into the bottom right. That just gives us a 4x4 grid, and you can go ahead and then tap on the magnet when you're done. And then we can go ahead and add in a circle to the center of our design. Now I'll tell you what, let's actually go back to the magnet and turn it back on. Let's then go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this dark purple here in the top left of the palette. It's the first color. We're going to go ahead then, and we need the monoline brush. So we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. And we'll set the size. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be something you can see. So something maybe around about say 15. That's perfectly fine. And as you can see, because we're using the magnetics of the grid, you can only draw along the grid. But that also means if we go to our create options, if we go to the shape option and circle, if we go ahead and find that center point like so, we can go ahead and drag out from the center and it will snap a circle. So if we go ahead and do that again, I'm going to go ahead and draw outwards and it will snap a circle all the way to the end. And then what you can do is you can just bring in the area here. So let's do that again. Let's go draw that circle in, and then we can go ahead and bring it in using the right hand side just a little bit so you leave a bit of a gap running around the outside. And then what you can do is you can tap on your circle tool when you're done. And you can turn off the magnet now as well. You can leave the grid on though, so you can see my work and see where to lay things out. And then what you can do is you can just go up to your create options and go to the option of fill, and using the same color, tap and drag to the right hand side just a couple of times until you get rid of the fuzzy line that potentially runs around the outside there, and hit the tick when you're done. Let's then go ahead and introduce our tree at this point. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush and change it to, I'm going to use the soft taper brush. You can change it to whatever you like. And we're going to go to settings, and you can see my smoothing is set to 50 there. Now with a size probably around about 30 as I've got it set up at the minute, there we go. We can go ahead and draw in our tree, and you want to start off by drawing in the kind of basic shape of where you want your tree to run. So for example, we're going to start roughly here, and we want to go ahead and kind of draw in a bit of a bank like so, like this. Then go ahead and link them up at the bottom by drawing from side to side. And then you go to your fill tool and then go to fill, tap and drag to the right a couple of times until you get rid of that fuzzy line and hit the tick when you're done. Now we just need to make sure that's in the middle. So we just go to edit and basic transform and just move that slightly off to the middle and hit the tick. And then I'll just fill in that little gap there. And then from there, we'll create another new layer, and then we can draw in our main structure of our tree. Take a look at my grid for where I lay things out so you can do exactly the same. I want to go ahead and start right up here, really lightly creating some lovely S-bend, and then come all the way down into here. So that's going to be my trunk. And then from there, I can go ahead and start to flush this out a little bit more. So I can go ahead and come down here. I'll leave a little bit of a gap, and then I'll connect it here, and then that way that almost looks like a bit of like root almost that's sticking up and out of the ground. I'm going to go ahead and grab my fill tool and just tap and drag to the right hand side here. Now I've obviously not drawn a line across the bottom, have I? So let's go ahead and do that. We'll connect them up, so then I can go to my fill tool and tap and drag to the right. There we go, and hit the tick. So we're going to build off of this. So we want to try and flush out a nice curvy S-like shapes to our tree. So I'm going to go ahead and draw one over here as well. So just lovely S shapes, really simple, something like that. So we've got loads of curls in there. We'll go ahead and we'll draw in another one that's going to come off from the sort of midpoint over here. And this one's just going to be a little bit more simple just to start with. And from there, I think we've got everything we would need in order to start flushing this out. So let's go down this line again, just letting it run back into the trunk. So you want to make sure, of course, your trunk is nice and thick in there. So we're just going to go ahead and run that down a little bit more. I'm going to go around that a couple of times. Again, just trying to thicken it up as I go. And then what we want to do is also factor in maybe a couple of smaller little curls off from the side here. Just some smaller branches. Or something like this. Now we want to leave an area here for what will be a swing, so something in this kind of space here. So try to avoid adding anything in this kind of area here. We also want to again make sure these branches that come off from here, let's make sure that they run off from that main trunk like nice and smooth, as in like they just curve up and outwards from there. And then what we want to do is we want to take a look at our branches that we've created so far and try to create additional branches that just run off. Keep your pressure nice and light if you do have pressure sensitivity, that is, and just create lots and lots of curly little shapes to create our little sub branches, you know, all the little smaller ones that curve off. Again, this is meant to be a nice curly, just fun aesthetic to this one. Nothing too kind of serious, to be honest. So a little something like that off that branch looks nice. Let's go ahead and try to fill in this space here a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll kind of run one off from here and just create a couple of small S's. And again, you always want to make sure that they thicken up. So we need to go back into here now, thicken that up even more. Lovely. Let's just thicken that up into there, rounding that corner off. So you may want to go into something a little bit sort of less tapered like this one is, and animated like this one. You could use something like the monoline brush. And then I'm going to go ahead and create some smaller little curly shapes. Now we don't want things to get too dense, okay? So we don't want to overdo that kind of style. I'm going to create another one that runs a little bit higher, and then I can create a smaller little bundle of little branches up here. We're just looking to create lots of little S shapes and curls and whatnot in our tree. And this is where we're going to add in our leaves too, of course. Now my tree at the minute's a little bit larger than I want it to be. In a moment we'll go ahead and reduce the scale down just so that you're aware. And I'll create another little one. And I want them again to always kind of run like with a certain sort of style. So I'm not quite getting the one I want there. So maybe I'll create like a hook shape instead. And you can use hook shapes to fill in gaps. I would urge you to try and not do them too close to one another. That way they don't look like you've just used filler content. So sometimes these little shapes just take a little while to just fill out properly. That one looks nice. And then of course I'm going to move down into this area here first, because I want to go ahead and create like a sub branch of some sort moving over to here. And then from there I can go ahead and create my little curly S shapes from here. Little curls, lovely. Super fun, super easy. You can draw trees in so many different ways, like more real life aesthetic to them, or in other areas you can go ahead and create something really fun and unique like this, where the rules are a little less strict, and therefore you can have some more fun with it because you don't have to worry about the stresses of making it look realistic. Now the one thing I definitely need to do is this branch here, as it comes all the way into here, I have to thicken this up quite a bit. It's got to come off of the trunk in a much more believable way. And I've got to be able to quite easily identify where my main branches are and where they come from the trunk. So let's go ahead and see if we can create another little curl in there, maybe another one in there. We don't want to do too many, but overall that's pretty much got the right shape to it. I think I might have to just create a sub one down here to kind of balance out the whole tree. And then what we'll do is we'll create a new layer. On that new layer, we'll go ahead and go to our brushes. So let's back out of that little menu there. We can go ahead and go into something, say like chalks, and use the cracked chalk brush. You may have a different brush that you prefer the look of for this, so please try some different things. I've got 51% set as the brush size. We are going to create small areas and bundles of leaves. So I'm just going to go ahead and create like a very simple kind of shape like this. In fact, do you know what? Let's make that brush size even smaller. Let's go down to 30 just so I'm in full control of where that lands on the screen. And I can create these little bundles of leaves like so. And again, we're just going to create small areas and clusters of this. We don't want to kind of pack it all in too much. We don't have to do too much of this sort of leaf style foliage everywhere. You can just tap and squiggle your pen in some gaps just to add in some areas of it. At the top here, you definitely want to kind of have a hierarchy, you know, which area is the highest. And you can always go beyond just where your sort of curly points were. You can always drag a little bit beyond them if you want to. So for example, here I'm going to make this the kind of highest point and kind of separate it a little bit from that area. And it's always best to kind of make the center of the tree the tallest. And then we'll move over to here, creating these lovely squiggly shapes. Just trying to go over the top of some of your curls, not everywhere, but in the majority of spaces. Let's go along there. Again, you don't have to also fill this in fully either. You can just tap a little bit, you know, tap, adding in little areas that just make their way off from those rounded shapes, and just maybe add in a good amount of sort of variation for you in your design. Now down here, I just want to make sure we kind of add a little bit on that end. This area here is looking a little bit too skinny, so I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit more in there. It's a little bit in that area there. We can add one in the middle of the tree, but it doesn't want to be a large area. You want to kind of keep that towards the outer areas. And once you've created something like this, you're pretty much good to go. I'm just adding in a tiny bit down here now to try and balance out the piece. Now, while we're here, we're going to go ahead and tap on this layer and alpha lock it, so we can't paint outside of our little areas that we've already added some color to. I'm going to go to the palette, and we're just going to grab a light tone. So I want to grab this color here. It's the fifth color on the bottom row. And I'm going to zoom in, and because we're alpha locked, we can't paint outside of what's already there. So all we can do is just draw simply on top of what's already there. And you're going to have to kind of go with the flow already, kind of ahead of time a little bit, adding in some lighting towards the left and underside of some of your bundles of leaves here. Now don't add it absolutely everywhere. You know, you can leave some, especially on the back over here, maybe the rest of the tree's blocking it, and keep the left side a little bit brighter. And talking about brightness, you can go one color brighter, which is the one just beside it, the sixth color on that bottom row, and just tap away along there. So for a minute, you may start to lose some of the edges against the white background, but they'll come back out in a moment. So keep it down to a minimum if you can. And by the way, if you come back to this later on and you're not quite happy with it, you can always go ahead and make sure the layer is still alpha locked and just color the whole thing with purple again and start again with the same shapes, but with a purple set of leaves ready to go again. Now, what we can then do is we can start to scale this accordingly to fit the design a little bit better. So I'm going to go up to my cursor. I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to go to basic transform. And then depending on what you're on, Android or iOS, on iOS here, for example, I can tap on this little circle in the bottom right corner of each of the layers that I need to select. I believe on Android, you can just simply tap. I do have my Android tablet beside me, but I'll just go with this for a minute. So we'll scale this down. And I want to make sure that it just goes over the halfway point. I don't want it to be too big. I want it to sit here. So halfway point of this second row. This is why we use those grid systems, so that you can just see my layout and then you can lay out accordingly. Now the only thing I need to do, of course, is go back down to the little mound that we created, grab the same purple, which was the first color in the palette, change my brush back to calligraphy and the soft taper. And again, we'll just go ahead and just run that up here, kind of rounding off the shape a bit more. I'll color it in manually. And then I'll just kind of, again, run that up a little bit higher on either side, just to give it a little bit more of a curve to the land. Maybe I'll just kind of hill it out a bit more like so. Now let's go ahead and add in our background. So we're going to create a new layer and drag it underneath the circular frame that we created, this layer here. In this layer, we're going to go ahead and create a gradient. So we're going to go to gradients. So create and a gradient. I'm going to drag from the top right somewhat down towards the bottom left over here using the linear option. And if you don't have gradients in your app of choice, you're just going to have to do a blend of each color one after the other, or you could just do stripe after stripe after stripe and blur them together. Now we're going to grab the color in the top right up here of our line, and we're going to make our way through all of these kind of colors here. So we're going to grab the fourth color, and then what we're going to do is we're going to tap away. We're going to tap on the line. You can see if I tap on the line anywhere, I get another dot. And if I tap on this dot, I can select another color. So I grab the color beside it, the fifth color. Again, create another dot, tap on it, sixth color. Tap away, create a new dot, seventh color. And again, just keep creating dots and making your way through this palette of colors. So we're going to keep going. We've got one more color on the top row. And then we tap again. We go down to this row now, to the bottom row, first color. And again, we just keep going until we get to those green tones. So we keep going, we tap there. It's not that color, it's that color now. And we keep going. So I've got two more, the yellow and then the bright tone, which is going to be, of course, the final color. So I can just make that color down there. Now, of course, because you can edit this, you have more flexibility. So if you need to, you can just drag those dots around if they're not quite evenly spaced. Not that they necessarily need to be evenly spaced, but you do have the option to, of course, drag everything around and create the gradient. We want that gradient somewhat over here, down on this left side, a little bit lower, almost like so. And we want it to definitely sit somewhat above this bottom row here. So we've got the bottom row of our grid. We want it to sit here because we're going to add rolling hills in behind here. We want this yellow area to be a little bit higher. So I'm actually going to position that there. And I'm going to definitely make sure I bring in some dark tone up here in the top right. And then when you're done, hit the tick. Then you can also go ahead and go to your edit options and go to the option of edit and filters. If you go to structure and blur here, you can just drag that up to 100% just to blur them together. And you could do that a couple of times if you wanted to. Now, before we actually carry on with the background area, I want to create those rolling hills. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush, making sure it's still the soft taper or monoline, whichever one you prefer. In fact, I'll go to the monoline brush. And then we're going to go to our colors. We're going to utilize these colors here. So we're going to start off with the furthest hills, which is going to be the far right color on the bottom row. And we're going to draw in some very simple hills. So we're going to come along here and we're just going to, because it's so far back in the distance, we don't want to add any bumps and lumps necessarily to this. Go all the way around to your starting point. So you created like a loop, and then go to your fill tool and tap and drag to the right hand side again to get rid of that fuzzy line and hit the tick when you're done. And then as things get closer to us, we can create some interesting hills. So I've created a new layer. I'll go to my colors and grab the second color from the right on that bottom row. Brush again, wants to be the monoline brush. And we're going to go ahead now and draw in another set of hills. Now these ones can start to have a little bit more character to them if you want to. You can create some interesting hills. Maybe they raise up a tiny bit, but go all the way around to your starting point. Go back to your fill tool and tap and drag to the right and just fill it in. Hit the tick. Create a new layer. Go to your colors again. We've got two more to create. So we've got this bottom color here on the far right, third from right. And again, we'll create another set of hills. So now things are getting a little bit closer towards us. We can create some more interesting designs, maybe a little something like that, and go all the way around. Grab your fill tool and tap and drag to the right. Hit your tick when you're done. And one more layer to create. So we create a new layer. Go to your colors and grab the bottom of the fourth column from the right. And again, we draw in another set of hills. So let's maybe sort of frame this a little bit more by bringing in a hill over here. It gets a little bit higher in behind there. I'm taking a look at where I've got everything else and then go all the way around to the start. So you can see by putting a hill at the front here, it pushes things further back. Go to your fill tool, tap and drag to the right and hit the tick when you're done. And you've got these lovely rolling hills there in the background. Now what we need to do is we need to tap on the top one that we just worked on, and we need to go ahead and alpha lock it. So you tap on the lock. Then go to your brush and change it to something like sprayers and the soft airbrush. So find an airbrush if you're in a different app. Soft airbrush. Your color wants to be now set to this color here. So it's the fifth color from the right on the bottom row. And with a soft airbrush, my settings here are set to these options here. So about 64 on flow and opacity. Smoothness is 100. Size, we can probably set that to around about 2 to 300. And we can go left to right here, adding in a bit of a glow at the bottom of here. Now keep it really, really light to start with. Don't add too much. Then go to the hill in behind. Tap on that and alpha lock it too. And again, add in a bit of a glow towards the bottom area there. There we go. We go to the one in behind, we tap on it and alpha lock it again. And then because we're getting into a more condensed area, we might need to bring the brush size down to say 170 and just add a bit of a glow at the bottom. That's not necessarily glow, it's maybe like mist rolling through those hills. And right at the very back, we're going to go to the very back hill, tap on that and alpha lock it. And again, just brighten that up at the bottom. Right at the bottom there, in behind them. And you should end up with these lovely rolling hills. Now let's go ahead and start to work on our sky area. So we've got our gradient. We need to go to our smudge tool and tap on our smudge tool. Now we can find a brush that we like the look of for this. And if we go into the option of pens, I'm going to go ahead and use the Torn Ink pen here. So if I tap on that, I've got my smudge settings set to these options here, 75, 20 and 80. And we're going to go ahead and smudge out our lines, of course. Now the size is maxed out at 125 and we want to push color across our screen. So we're going to go up, for example, and into the blues. And we're kind of, if I draw in a couple of just lines for you, our sun lines want to kind of go like this a little bit, okay? They want to be pointing down towards this left side, coming across very horizontal at the distance. And above us, we want these kind of vertical lines. So we want to point them down. Now, one thing you can do is you can turn off your grid if you want. Go to your create options and go to the option of perspective and a 1 point. And then you can drag this way off over here to the left hand side. And if you drag it just off screen a little bit and a bit lower than what we need, so a little something like this, and then make sure you can turn off the magnet. You don't necessarily need the magnet on. It might just give you enough of a guide as to where to smudge and push the color. So if we go ahead and we zoom in, if we start to push up from here, we can push some of the blues up and over the top of the dark blue, and vice versa. If you start out here, you can push and bring in some dark blue from the very top. So we want to sort of bring that dark blue down and start to build like a bit of a streaky system. Now what I urge you to do really is just do these lines on the outer edges, because I want to get rid of this kind of drawing guide. I'm not really a fan of it. I just want to draw in a few lines that follow suit with that, so I can push up some of the purples up and over into the blues and vice versa, bring the dark blue down and through. And I'll just draw a few in the distance here. So I'll just try and create some streaks across the sky, pushing mainly yellow across. So pushing that yellow across the screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. I've got a basic idea now as to sort of the rough angles I need to be pushing. So I can push the colors backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. So don't be afraid to bring in some of the dark tones first. You know, kind of push them in, press with larger amounts of pressure if you can, and be bold and create like a big streak through the sky. You know, like one that comes all the way through. And don't be afraid then to push, you know, the color, push the reds up and over the top of it, and then push dark tone back through it. You know, break it down, create, you know, variation in it. Don't be afraid to also wiggle your pen as well, to create a bit more of a fluffy cloud-like aesthetic to the design. We're having a bit of fun today. We're not sort of trying to create too much like real clouds or anything like that. We're just having a really fun time creating some interesting sky area here. So, you know, you may start to look at it and go, hang on, that doesn't look like clouds. It doesn't really need to. You'll be able to see from my final design, they don't necessarily look like that. It's just a painting aesthetic to a sky that just is quite nice to look at, isn't it? And if you want to, you can always go ahead and go back to the 1 point and turn it back on, just in case you didn't add enough lines like I haven't, just so that you can draw them back in. And also triple check that you're maybe doing it correctly as well. So you're just pushing up lines after line. So I've started out here to start with, and I'm going to bring in some purple over the top of the reds. I can push the red back over the top of the purple. I can push the blue over the dark blue and vice versa, and really streak them along. Don't go too far though. You don't want to drag like dark blue all the way through here. That's too much. We want to have this really cool sky effect going on. I'm just going to draw in a few lines here down in this bottom area. streaking up. The yellow is going to be really important to streak through like the red tones. So you're going to want to start to think about, can I start to push out some of these brighter tones and move them up and out of our design, up and away, like so. So can we get some of these yellow tones in here? And do we need to start all the way down in there and start pushing color out? So I've got loads and loads of lines happening now. I can turn back off my grid. In fact, no, I'm going to go back in, sorry, and add it in because I've missed this area here. And you can do the same though. You can jump between them. It doesn't really matter. And then turn it off. There we go. So I've got some idea now of the guidelines and where it needs to go. And already we're somewhat getting this effect. It's almost a bit like a tie-dye, isn't it? You can see like a bit of tie-dye in it. And I'm going to wiggle my pen along here as well. Once I start to draw in some streaks, I want to create some fun mix of all the colors and fun variation in shapes as well. I want to definitely try and get some more yellow running through here. So I just need to start pushing up some more colors here, pushing that through the sky and just creating a lovely, almost like a painting like gradient in the sky. You can wiggle your pen and bring in some large clouds almost at the top. At the bottom, I urge you to maybe bring your brush size down to like a smaller size, maybe like a 76, and create lots more streaks in the distance where things start to get a little bit more compressed. So you can start to really push out some really long streaks there at the bottom. Really trying to create some fun color. This is so therapeutic. I love this. Awesome. Let's create some more lines up here. That is looking awesome. Lots of color in this sky. And shoot a long red one up and over the top as well. Change your brush size back up if you need to, and shoot some of the purple over the top of the blue, right over towards the edge of the screen. Smudging like this is really fun because there's not really a lot of rules to it. You can really just take it easy, enjoy yourself. I'm trying to push a lot of this yellow, bright yellow, along the horizon now. So you can see me just wiggling my pen constantly in the same area, just trying to bring some of that bright yellow along the horizon a bit more. And then a couple of more smudges will look great. Awesome. Beautiful big sky happening in there. And in certain areas, you can just bring the brush size right down in terms of size. So let's bring the size down again to about 50. And maybe you can just smudge out some of these, trying to create like circular shapes. And to be honest with you, the way Infinite Painter kind of smudges, it might not work too well, but you can try your best and see what happens. Now, one thing we can then do is if we want to, we can create a new layer. We can go just the one, we just need the one new layer. Once you create a new layer, you can tap on it and change the blend mode from normal to the option of, we want to change it to linear dodge. We probably want to bring the opacity right down to around about sort of, let's bring that down to about sort of 30%. And we're going to go to our brush. We're going to make sure our brush is set to, let's go to, we could probably use the soft airbrush, but let's try, let's use the soft airbrush. Let's bring the size right down, something fairly small, around about 20 just to start with. And we are going to use the color, which was this one here. So it's the fifth color from the right at the bottom. You can just take a look at some of your kind of cloud-like shapes, and can you just wiggle your pen along some of them just to create like fluffy rounded shapes like this, and kind of create cloud-like shapes in the sky by brightening up the underside of some of your more rounded smudging. So you may need to go back onto that previous layer and just create, more purposeful clouds here and there. You don't have to even do this step, but it's just optional if you want to just give your design a little bit more flair in the sky potentially. And you can create rounded fluffy shapes here in your sky, rounded fluffy cloud-like shapes. By the way, I do have a full clouds tutorial using Infinite Painter that's available on the channel. So if that's something you find yourself wanting to try out a little bit more, you can check that tutorial out on the channel. And then in the distance, can we maybe sort of manufacture a few clouds? To be honest, my opacity is probably a little bit too high for this on this layer, so I'm going to definitely bring that down in a second. I want that opacity to be much lower. It's looking a little bit too bright. I'm just manufacturing some clouds by just creating sort of rounded fluffy shapes. Could I make the brush size a bit bigger and go to 60% and create some maybe larger sky? I think we could. We could definitely sort of, again, manufacture these. We could create clouds somewhat out of nothing. A couple of wiggles here and there. Now for me, I want to definitely go ahead and tap on this layer, bring that opacity right down a bit more, down to something around about say 18 for me, but you may feel like it looks okay as it is. Now another thing we can do with the sky is go ahead and create some planets. Now if we create a new layer, we keep the same color and we go to our create options. We're going to go to the option of shape. Let's change our brush and let's go to the option of calligraphy and fills and solid fill. And we're going to tap and drag outwards to create a planet-like shape. Tap on the circle when you're done. Grab your eraser and set your eraser to the soft airbrush under sprayers. Size, probably make that around about 300 and just round off the right hand side, leaving the left side a bit brighter. Then what you can go ahead and do is you can tap on the layer and change its blend mode from normal to the option of overlay, or you can change it to linear dodge and bring the opacity down. It's totally up to you. Linear dodge at around about 36 looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to bring that down to around about that point. And what we can then do is go crazy and duplicate the layer, and then you can go ahead and go up to your create options, edit, basic transform. Let's scale it down, move it across. You can rotate it slightly, hit the tick, and then duplicate that layer and just fill out your sky with as many or as little as you want with your little planets there. So I'm going to hit the tick. I'm going to duplicate that one because that one's a nice little small one there, nice little filler almost, and you can fill out your sky. Now one thing I also urge you to do is once you've sort of filled out your sky and you've created a good solid amount of sort of planets, etc., and moons maybe, is to then go ahead and just vary up the opacities per moon. You don't want to make them all the same necessarily, so have some fun creating different variations on the scale, the opacities, and just see what you can come up with. That one there, for example, let's bring that one down a little bit more. Let's bring that down to about 17. That large one can stay as it is. They're my clouds, and you can just go through each one and just tap on it and bring its opacity up or down depending on how you want to sort of fill out your sky. And I'm pretty much done with filling this in. I think I could do like one down here. The only thing you want to make sure is that the edge of the brighter side is facing this left side. And then let's duplicate that one. I think we've got space for one more. I'll rotate it, move it up here, up into that top corner, hit the tick when I'm done. So you can see I'm focusing a lot of the moons and planets over here on the right hand side. Let's go ahead and add in some stars. Now what you can do is when you're done with all of these layers, you can tap on them and start to merge them all down one after the other if you want to, all of your moons and planets. I urge you maybe to just leave one at the very bottom just in case you want to add more or less, and then that way you've got the layers. And you can also merge these hills together as well if you're done with them. It's totally up to you. Let's create a new layer. Let's go to our brush. You can go to glow and go to say the light pen, for example, and then you can just tap away in here. So I've got a very, well, it's actually maxed out in terms of size. It's 125 there. You can just go ahead and create little dots here and there through your sky, small and large, create little dots here and there just to create some stars. And we'll change the blend mode in a moment, but for now we'll just keep filling out our sky. Now you want to kind of avoid adding in stars like through your planets. So now you've laid your planets out, you can add in some stars primarily towards this top right side, just making sure you avoid adding any through your moons and planets, etc. So I'm just going to keep going, adding in some fun stars in the gaps. Again, try to sort of pack out this top right area if you can, and vary up your sizes, vary up your kind of clusters as well, adding in stars where you think is possible, but making sure that you leave some gaps. You don't need to fill out absolutely everywhere. You can put a few over on the left hand side, maybe they're shining bright through there, but primarily they would be up here in the darker area where we're exposing them a little bit more. When you've added in a good amount, you can tap on the layer, you can change the blend mode from normal to the option of soft light, and that'll just blend them into the sky a little bit more. You can see they've all dulled down quite a bit. You can tap on this layer and duplicate it if you want to, and then grab your cursor, go to edit and basic transform and scale that down a little bit and just sort of push them around, filling in some gaps maybe and adding in more density. So I've duplicated it yet again. So I've duplicated it twice more and then moved it off to the right hand side there just to fill out the sky a bit more. Now at this point, for example, you may want to go ahead and go to those leaves that we spoke about at the top If we go to our color and grab the same color, top left of the palette, and go back to our brush and the charcoals we had there. So we go charcoals and we had the chalk, sorry, the cracked chalk. We can go ahead and zoom in now, and with the same brush, probably reduced to about 220 now, you can sort of go around in a circular motion and overlap some of your highlights and push them a little bit more towards the edges. So you can leave some with, like, you know, actual clusters of color, but you can also push right up against the edge there, leaving the tiniest little bit of yellow on there and just toning them down a little bit. For me, they're all a little bit too bright. And if you want to, just bring your opacity down to say 45, and you can just layer on top of there and have more depth to the shadow tones as well. You can just layer it on top. And if you go over it, of course, a couple of times, you can really pack it back in. I just want to make sure that those highlights just sit on the edges of our tree, nothing too much. Now, one thing I want to now do is add some details to the tree. Now, what we'll need to do is we'll need to go ahead and tap on the tree and merge it with the stump that was underneath it. So that's all one layer now. If we create a new layer and we tap on it and then clip it to the tree, we can't draw on this layer outside the boundaries of that tree, otherwise it won't show. And if we then go ahead and go to our colors and set our color to the second color in the palette, you brush to the option of paint and thin hairs. You could even use the thick rake if you wanted to. With a brush size set to around about 80, you can go down the tree, create some wiggles, bumps and lumps in here, and run that all the way down to the bottom. And maybe you create some additional ones here and you go along this one like this, and then maybe a couple of small ones, really light with your pressure if you have pressure sensitivity. Just something simple like this, maybe even just a little bit on this branch up here. And then you can tap on this, you can alpha lock it, so you can go ahead and lock it. So now we can't paint outside what we've already painted on this layer. And if we go to our colors and we grab the color here, the first color in the palette, we go to our brush and we go to the option of sprayers, and we go to soft airbrush. You can then, with a brush size of what we had before, you can just go ahead and just paint that in. So I've got it set to around about 200 now. I can just fade that out on the right hand side, fading out some of those lines, fading them out at the top. And then I can also go ahead and go to my colors and grab the third color in the palette. And then I can probably set this a little bit smaller, probably down to about 150, and brighten up some of those lines on the tree. So a little bit lighter than that, but just a little bit of a light glow on that left side. And then that way you can just highlight a few of those lines, bringing them back to life, revealing them against the darkness of the tree. So you can introduce lovely little highlights like this. And if you feel like they are a little bit too messy or a little bit too much, you can always tap on the layer and turn off the alpha lock. Grab your eraser and tap on the eraser and use something like calligraphy and the soft taper brush. With a brush size set to around about, say, let's go down to about sort of 14, 15, you could run through here and erase gaps in there just to kind of break them down and show a little bit more of the twists and contour of the tree, and, you know, cut away into some of them. Just create an interesting avenue, just curly lines basically following up the tree. And then what that means is what we've got left is simply like the bark, etc., that are just showing or getting some lighting. So I think we could go ahead and maybe chop in a little bit heavier in there just to hide it underneath that root. And to me, that looks wicked. I think we could go ahead and maybe sort of run a line maybe through there, maybe two, and then down this tree into the shadows, maybe over on the right hand side. So it just breaks it down a little bit more, but still gives your tree some lovely texture. And the final thing to do is to go ahead and add in our swing. So we'll create a new layer. We don't want it clipped, so we'll tap on it and unclip it. We'll go to our brush and we'll tap on it and use the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. And with a size set to around about sort of, let's go down to about 8 or 9. I'm going to zoom in. We want this to be nice and small, so we're going to zoom in. We want our color, to be set to the first color in the palette. And we're going to draw in 2 parallel lines from one another. So one here, we'll draw in another one here, maybe a little bit lower on this left side. And then from there, you want to draw in 2 lines. You want to draw in one here. You can hold your pen down at the end if you can, depending on what app you're in. Usually you can hold down and then that'll be it. Or you can go to your options of shapes and line and draw one in like so, and then that will give you a bit more freedom if you need it afterwards. Otherwise you can just freehand it like I'm about to, drawing a line like that, drawing another line across. So it did snap this time. We'll go all the way across and then link that up and then fill that in. Doesn't really matter too much. As long as your swing has that kind of angle, it should then be facing over towards your light source rather than just hanging straight down. And the kids maybe climb up this big tree and jump on from this massive piece of root here sticking out. And when you're done, you can pinch with 2 fingers, you can go full screen with 4, and you end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, a massive shout out to all of my members here on the channel who help make these videos possible. If you want to support the channel and all the work that I do here, as well as get a loyalty badge beside your name and early access to these tutorials, you can go ahead and become a member using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.